You, want to know what happens when you mess up your circadian rhythms? Yeah. Okay, fine. I may have been playing with my dog and got headbutted, but if it wasn't that, I bet you I could trace back this owie to circadian disalignment, specifically when it comes to eating. Here are two really interesting associations as it pertains to just that, which your health and longevity will thank you for knowing. Let's go. Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftinbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and longevity and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic way. Alright, now that we've got the black eye, or eyes, out of the way, the two interesting metrics that we are going to be exploring today are daytime eating frequency and nighttime fasting duration, highlighting two U-shaped associations that you need to know if you want to live happy, long, and finish strong. And as you could probably decipher, those two metrics kind of go hand in hand with each other. And as the astute longevity practitioner would point out, also go hand in hand with our circadian rhythms, or our innate biological programming, which ebbs and flows with the day-night cycles of the earth, being ever so influenced by our actions throughout the day. One of the strongest of these actions being when we eat, because that stimulates a downstream flurry of metabolic activity that takes place for the next 4 to 8 hours. And in case you didn't know, these biological rhythms are absolutely critical for preserving the most important thing when it comes to feeling how we're capable of feeling: our cellular efficiency. And as we've seen across all of the other circadian deep dives on this channel, which probably warrant their own playlist at this point, a disruption of this innate biological cycle is a one-way ticket to disease and dysfunction town, USA. I only say USA because we're probably one of the biggest abusers here. Because being chronically disaligned is proving to be, sneakily and surprisingly, right up there on the health risk charts with being a chronic smoker. Yeah, saying a lot, isn't it? And here's why. This disalignment has been associated with metabolic conditions such as diabetes, obesity, mitochondria dysfunction and metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular and neuronal problems like hypertension, dyslipidemia, atherosclerosis, cognitive impairments, mood disorders, and neurodegeneration, along with several different types of cancer. Yikes is an understatement, and I regret to inform you, with all this, there is no doubt that longevity liability numero uno, chronic inflammation, is present as well. All driven by chronically living a life which goes against the innate pre-programmed software of the human body, being optimized to perform our activities when the sun goes up, then resting and recovering when the sun is down. Sounds so simple, right? Yet, a substantial percentage of the adult population is regularly engaging in activities which oppose their natural rhythms, very much in thanks to this 24/7 digital age that we live in. And maybe this isn't every single day, but disrupting a few days a week, like weekends, compounded over a few decades of living, can leave a lasting impact. One of the most cut and dry examples of the health impact from chronic disalignment is overnight shift work, or working the overnight shift several days a week for a long period of time. A topic we've covered quite a bit up until this point. And it's been observed that forcing the body to be active and eat during its biologically preferred rest and recovery time is associated with obesity, diabetes, mood disorders, and dysfunction that is so obvious the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is part of the World Health Organization, has classified it as a Class 2A carcinogen, or something that probably causes cancer. Wild. I know. Which makes these two studies, coming from an analysis on the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, so very interesting. Particularly because it identifies several U-shaped associations between the aforementioned daytime eating frequency, nighttime fasting duration, and some pretty serious health conditions, specifically depression and biological aging. Yeah. Two heavy hitters. And you may be wondering, what exactly is a U-shaped association? Well, it's a statistical association that looks like a U on the chart when being mapped out, indicating that the association is strongest at the low and high ends of the spectrum. Like a U. So let's start with the depressive elephant in the room. In this recent 2025 study out of Harbin Medical University in China, researchers rigorously examined the relationships between daily eating frequency, nighttime fasting duration, and the prevalence of depression. Doing this by analyzing data from nearly 30,000 American adults who were part of the cohort and running it through rigorous regression models to normalize for interpretations. And what they found was rather interesting. Individuals who reported a daily eating frequency under 3 times or over 4.6 times per day exhibited a significantly greater risk for depression, with respective increases of 28% and 17% compared to the sweet spot 3 to 4 times a day. Pretty interesting. I know. But the more interesting finding may have been around nighttime fasting duration, where researchers observed that people who had nighttime fasting windows under 10 hours or over 15 hours per night had a 32 and 37% increased likelihood of depression. Oh, all those fasters out there looking like deers in headlights right now, huh? Or raccoons. But don't worry, we'll talk about why you shouldn't sweat it in just a minute. In the end, the team concluded that both daily eating frequency and nighttime fasting duration are independently related to risk of depression, and the likely reason almost certainly tracks back to our circadian biology. But before we get there, let's talk about study number 2, biological aging, which interestingly, yet not surprisingly, has been linked to chronic depression in a bad way. This was a 2024 analysis, again out of Harbin Medical University in China, which investigated the potential associations between daytime eating frequency and nighttime fasting duration with accelerated aging. Here they looked at the same cohort of individuals, analyzing 12 blood biomarkers through 4 biological aging algorithms, finding that there was, in fact, an association. And interestingly, a U-shaped one, if you forgot. Observing that a daytime eating frequency below 3 and nighttime fasting duration under 10 or over 14 hours per night were independently associated with higher predicted age metrics. You don't say. But how reliable is this data? Or how many grains of salt must be taken with it when finding ways to apply its results in your everyday life? Well, it's certainly not a double-blind, randomized controlled trial, following the same participants over the course of their life and doing it at scale, but the reality is, those types of studies on health and longevity just aren't feasible in this modern day. So, the next best options are studies like these. Big sample sizes of semi-reliable data over the span of 5 to 15 years. Understanding that with these big cohorts, you'll get relatively good data for identifying broad population-based trends, even though a lot of the data was self-reported. And that's exactly what we got here. 2 U-shaped associations which track back to circadian disalignment, along with the dysfunction that it can drive. That being said, studies like this always leave room for outliers and don't necessarily identify the optimal strategy for optimal health. Instead, they provide some high-level, broad-based recommendations for the population that was studied. And guess what? If that population happens to be standardized on the modern, ultra-processed, ultra-sedentary, ultra-stressed, sleep-deprived lifestyle, or what some may call the American or Western lifestyle, you're going to see results and recommendations swayed towards that metabolically sick population. So saying that someone who is dialed in on real food eating, high quality circadian aligned sleep, daily exercise, adequate outdoor time, clean toxin free living, and stress mitigation can't eat more than 5 meals a day or have a nightly fasting window under 10 or over 15 hours is complete baloney. Don't eat baloney. Bad choice. Don't do it. But you get what I mean. Thus, like always, the optimal strategy depends on all of those other factors. Or the context, because they are the true variables which drive cellular and metabolic efficiency. And when they're dialed in, guess what? Circadian rhythms are more than likely dialed in as well. And just to reiterate this point, we've covered in many research reviews all across the Fasting 101 playlist that a nightly fasting window above 15 hours, accompanied with a good healthy lifestyle and proper circadian alignment, could be a potential secret for optimizing longevity. So when in doubt, focus on the overall healthy lifestyle. And don't let anyone tell you different. That being said, what we do know is opting to live a life that goes against your natural circadian rhythms is a losing cause, as it most certainly will begin a slow march towards dysfunction throughout your body. At first, quietly impacting things like cortisol cycles, cravings, inflammation, and sleep, but under the covers, putting all the pieces in place for a vicious cycle of cellular dysfunction, building and driving more cellular dysfunction. A situation which ultimately ends with the early onset of disease, which you already know ain't cool for longevity school. So building a lifestyle which prioritizes keeping your body aligned should be at the top of your to-do list. And lucky for you, we have a full breakdown on how to do just that, discussing things such as wake and bedtime, sleep duration, morning routine, sunlight, artificial light, exercise, caffeine, meal timing, and a whole lot more, which will be linked in the show notes below. In the meantime, I'd love to hear your top circadian aligning habits, so please drop them in the comments below and let's get better together. Because now you really know what happens when you screw up your alignment. The circadian fairy comes when you're passed out from exhaustion and gives you 2 black eyes. And trust me, you don't want to have to walk around for a few weeks like this. So keep that body aligned.